"The bride has come, my king." I did not look up at once. I had heard that sentence a dozen times in a single winter, and every time it had meant the same thing: another sealed carriage, another daughter of another house, another careful face schooled to want me. I could read them all before they crossed the threshold. The nervous ones twisted their rings. The ambitious ones lifted their chins. The frightened ones would not meet my eyes, and I did not blame them, for I am not a soft-looking man, and the crown of Carrollfell is a heavy thing to marry. I had turned every one of them away. My council had stopped hiding their despair. So when Steward Farrell said those 4 words at the foot of my dais, snow still melting off his shoulders, I let the ledger stay open under my hand and said only, "Send her to warm herself. I will not keep a woman standing in wet clothes to be looked at like a horse." "She is already in the hall, my king. The storm came up faster than the outriders. Her carriage—" Farrell hesitated. "There was some trouble on the road. She arrived on foot at the postern half frozen." That made me lift my head. The great hall of Stonewake is long and dim in the deep of winter, lit down its spine by iron braziers and the 2 hearths that never go cold. Wind battered the high shutters. And down that long stone aisle between the fires, a woman was walking toward me, and I felt something go wrong in my chest, the way a man feels a stare that isn't there in the dark. She was not what the houses sent me. The daughters of the great lines came wrapped in fur and jewels, powdered against the cold, escorted by 6. This woman came alone in a traveling coat the color of wet bark, mended at both elbows, snow still crusting the hem. Her dark hair was half out of its braid and stuck to one cheek. Her boots were a man's boots, cracked at the toe. Over one shoulder she carried a satchel, and one hand was pressed flat against it as though whatever it held mattered more than warmth. And she was looking at me, not down, not away, not with the practiced hunger. She looked at me the way a person looks at whether they mean to cross, measuring it, deciding what it would cost. I have spent my whole life reading faces. It is the first gift of my line and the coldest. I can tell you a man's fear from his pride at 40 paces, tell you which of my captains slept badly and which of my petitioners is lying before he has finished his bow. Faces open to me like books left in the rain. Hers did not open. I looked at her and got nothing, no reed, no bottom, no floor under the water. My wolf, which has never once in 9 years been surprised by anything a stranger did, went very quiet and leaned toward her the way it leans toward the one thing in a forest it cannot smell coming. I did not understand it. I only knew that the cold, sure sense by which I had ruled every room I ever entered had failed me for the first time in my life, and it had failed me across the whole length of my own hall, and I could not look away from the woman who had done it. She stopped at the foot of the dais. She was shivering and trying not to show it, and doing a fair job. "You're the king, then," she said. Not a question. Her voice was low and a little rough from the road. "I am." "Right." She glanced back down the hall at the doors still shuddering in their frames, then at me again. "Then I'd apologize for the state of me, but I've been walking through a wall of snow for the better part of an afternoon, and I've decided I'm not sorry for anything at all." A pause. "There's a fire behind you. Would it kill anyone if I stood by it?" Behind me Farrell made a small strangled sound. A great house's daughter did not speak to the king of Carrollfell like that. Every noble in the hall had gone still. I should have been offended. I had turned girls out for less, for a wrong word, a false smile, the wrong kind of one in their eyes. That is what I told my council, at least, and what I told myself, that I turned them away because none of them was right. The truth I did not say was smaller and worse. I turned them away because I could read every one of them straight through, and there was nothing under any of them I hadn't already seen. I could not read this one at all. "Come," I said, and stood, and stepped aside from the great hearth so she could pass. She came up the 2 steps as though she were not sure the stone would hold her, and stopped an arm's length from the fire and closed her eyes, and let out a breath that shook. Up close she was younger than the road had made her look, and there was frost in her lashes, and I had the sudden, unkingly urge to put my own cloak around her shoulders, which I did not do, because I did not yet understand what was happening to me, and I do not act on things I do not understand. "What is your name?" I asked. She opened her eyes. Something flickered in them, quick, gone, unreadable, and she said, "Sorrow." "Only sorrow? It's enough of a name to warm your hands by." Farrell cleared his throat. "The Lady of House Verlaine, my king. Come to seal the Northern Accord as arranged." He said it firmly, the way a man says a thing he needs to be true. "The betrothal your council pressed for these 3 months." I remembered the accord. I had signed the letters half listening. House Verlaine held the 2 mountain passes that fed my western border, and my captains had spent a hard year begging me to bind the alliance in the old way, blood to blood, a marriage to make the passes ours in law as well as war. I had agreed the way a tired man agrees to anything to stop the asking. A Lady Ione of Verlaine, they had told me. A quiet, dutiful woman. She would arrive before the deep snows. The woman by my fire did not look quiet or dutiful. She looked like someone who had talked her way out of a great many rooms and into a few she shouldn't have. But I could not read her, and I had never in my life met a person I could not read. And in that first hour I did not stop to ask myself whether the impossible thing standing at my hearth was the right woman or the wrong one. I only knew my wolf had lifted its head for her and would not put it down. "Lady Verlaine," I said, "be welcome at Stonewake." She looked at me for a long moment. There was that flicker again, a card turned face down and set aside. Then she inclined her head careful and said, "My thanks, King Riven," and turned back to the fire, and I saw her hand tighten once more around the strap of her satchel, as though she were holding on to the one true thing she had. They gave her the West Tower chamber, the one kept for a queen who had never come. I heard from the servants, in the way a king hears everything, that she had stood in the doorway of it a long while before she went in, that she had asked the girl who brought her supper whether she might keep the shutters open a crack, storm or no, and when the girl said the cold would be fierce, she had answered that she had slept in worse and liked to know the sky was still there, that she had not touched the fine gown laid out for her, and slept in her own mended shift, and set her satchel on the pillow beside her head. I told myself I noted these things because a king should know his guests. The morning came white and blind, the storm not spent but circling. No one would ride out of Stonewake for days. Whatever this woman was, she was mine to host until the passes cleared, and the council was beside itself with joy, because a betrothed bride snowed into the king's own hold could not run, and neither, they thought, could the king. I went down to the small hall to break my fast and found her already there. She was not eating. She was sitting at the long board with a cup of hot cider going cold at her elbow, and she had a deck of cards spread before her, worn, soft-cornered, the paint rubbed thin at the edges from 1,000 hands, and she was moving them across the table in some slow private order, turning them, reading them, the way another woman might tell beads. She did not notice me at first. Her whole face had changed. The wariness had gone out of it. She looked over her cards like someone alone in a house they had built. Then she felt me in the doorway, and the shutters came down behind her eyes again, quick and complete, and she swept the cards into a stack with one motion. "Do you always come up on people so quiet?" she said. "A man your size." "It is my hold. I go where I like in it." I sat across from her, which was not what a king does. A king takes the high seat, but the high seat was at the far end of the room, and I did not want to speak to her across a length of empty table. "What were you doing?" She turned the stacked deck over in her hands. "Passing the time. There's a great deal of it snowed in like this." "You were reading them." A pause. "You watch closely." "It is a habit I cannot break." I nodded at the deck. "Read mine, then." I do not know why I asked. I did not believe in card reading. My people keep the old wolf rights, the Munoths, the bond of fated mates that my grandmother swore was real and my father swore was a story, but painted cards told by wanderers at crossroads inns are a trick for coin, and every man of sense knows it. I asked because I wanted to watch her hands, and because I wanted, absurdly, to see whether she could read me when I could not read her. Something crossed her face. Wariness, then, I thought, a small, reckless spark of the thing she had shown at the fire, the thing that could not help itself. She spread the deck across the board in a smooth arc. "Pick 3, she said. "Don't think." Thinking's how people lie to themselves. I laid my hand on the cards. I do not act on impulse. I weighed which 3 the way I weigh everything. She watched me do it, and the corner of her mouth moved, and she said, "You're overruling your own gut. Whatever you touched first, take that." And I stopped, and she was right. My fingers had gone to a card and drawn back, and I turned it over instead. It was a painted king. Not a king on a throne. A king standing alone on a high wall in winter, looking out at a country of snow, and every window in the keep behind him was lit and warm, and he had his back to all of them. She looked at it a long moment. Then she looked at me, and for the first time the shutters were not all the way down, and what was behind them was not sly and was not a trick. It was something that had recognized something. "You keep everyone warm," she said quietly, "and stand out in the cold to do it. You've told yourself that's what a king is." She tapped the painted wall. "It isn't. That's just what it is to be lonely with a crown on." The small hall was very quiet. The fire ticked. I had heard flattery from 100 practiced mouths, and it slides off me like water off oiled leather. This was not flattery. It was true, and it was true in the exact private shape that I had never said to any living soul, and she had read it off a painted card in my own hand. This wandering woman I could not read at all, and I felt the floor go out from under me a second time. The same lurch as in the hall, my wolf surging up warm and certain in my chest for a stranger. And I understood, all at once and too late to stop it, what my grandmother had meant when she swore the bond was real. That it does not ask your leave, that it does not care what you had planned. I stood up too fast. The bench scraped. "That is enough," I said, and my voice came out rougher than I meant. She flinched not much, but I saw it, and I hated that I had put it there. "Forgive me. I did not have the words. I am not a man who runs out of words. I have matters in the yard." There were no matters in the yard. I went out into the storm anyway, bareheaded, and stood in the driving snow until the cold burned the sense back into me. And it did not work, because the cold no longer reached the place she had reached. I stood in the white and thought, "She is the Lady of Verlaine, come to be my queen by an accord I signed half asleep, and I have just felt the mate bond strike for her, and there is no world in which that is a simple thing, and I am the king, and I do not yet even know if she wants to be here at all." I did not know the half of it. The storm held for 4 days, and in 4 days a hold learns a guest better than a year of fair weather ever could. I watched her because I could not stop, and because I could not read her. The watching told me nothing I could be sure of, and everything I could not help believing. She would not stay in the Queen's Tower. By the 2nd day she had found the kitchens, an old Byrne who ran them, a woman who had made 3 of my captains cry and feared nothing on the earth, had somehow been won, and Sorrel sat by the great ovens shelling nuts and telling the scullery girls fortunes that were plainly invented and made them laugh until they wept. She found the kennels. My wolves are not tame. The great gray Ash, who has answered no hand but mine in 9 years and took the finger off a groom who reached for him, put his enormous head in her lap on the 2nd afternoon and slept there, and when I came looking for her and found that, she looked up guilty as a caught child and said, "He came to me. I didn't do anything," and I stood in the doorway and could not tell her that no one in the world could make Ash do that it was not a thing she could have arranged. She was kind to the servants in the offhand way of someone who had been a servant, or worse, and knew the weight of a hard word from someone with power. She never once played the great lady. When Farrell called her my lady, she answered to it a half-beat late every time, as though it were a name she was still getting used to. And every night, in the small hall when she thought she was alone, She took out the worn deck and read for herself in the firelight, her face open and unguarded and lit from within. And I stood in the shadow of the stair and watched a woman I could not read her own heart in painted cards, and I fell, and I fell, and I did not tell her, because I was the king and I did not yet trust the ground. On the third night she caught me watching. "You do that a great deal," she said, without turning around. "Stand where a person can't quite see you and look at them." "Yes." "Why?" I came down the last steps into the firelight. "Because I cannot read you," I said. It was the truest thing I had said aloud in years. I read everyone. It is the curse of my blood. I look at a face and it opens and there is nothing under it I have not seen. I looked at every daughter of every house they sent me and I knew each one to the floor before she reached my dais, and there was nothing there to want. I stopped. I look at you and there is a floor and I cannot reach it. It is the first time in my life I have wanted to keep looking. She had gone still, the cards forgotten in her hands. "That's a lonely way to see the world," she said finally. "Everyone opened and nothing new in any of them." "Yes." "It'd make a person cold." Her thumb moved over the soft edge of the deck. "It'd make a person build the whole keep to keep the cold in one man's tower." She looked at the painted king still lying on the table where I had left it 4 days ago, that I had not been able to make myself put away. "You keep the card." "I keep the card." For a long moment neither of us spoke. The wind leaned on the shutters, and I saw her come to some edge in herself, some ledge she had walked up to and stepped back from a dozen times in 4 days, and I saw her not step back, and my heart, my traitor mate-struck heart, rose up because I thought she was about to say she felt it too. "Riven," she said, my name, not my crown, the first time. "There's a thing I have to tell you and I've been a coward about it, and every hour I don't say it the fall gets worse." She drew a breath. "I'm not." The doors of the small hall boomed open. Cold air and torchlight and Farrell, snow to the knees, his face wrong. Behind him men in the mud green of the Western Guard, and behind them, cloaked and furious and frozen half to death, a woman I had never seen, pale, fine-boned, jeweled even under the frost, a great house's daughter to the marrow. "My king," Farrell said, and his voice cracked. "The passes opened at dusk. The Verlaine party, the true party, they were 4 days behind the storm, on the low road." He could not finish it. The frozen woman came forward and sank into a curtsy so perfect it was a weapon, and lifted her head, and said in a voice shaking with cold and rage, "Ione of House Verlaine, my king. Come, as promised, to be your wife." Her eyes went past me to the woman at the fire, to the worn cloak, the man's boots, the deck of painted cards. "And I do not know," she said, "who this creature is who has been wearing my name in your hall." The small hall went to ice. I turned. Sorrel had stood. The shutters were down over her eyes, all the way down, further than I had ever seen them, but her chin was up, the way it had been in the great hall on the first night, a person measuring the weather she meant to cross and reckoning the cost. "Tell them," I said, my voice did not sound like mine. "Tell them it is a mistake. Tell them who you are." "That's the trouble," she said, very quietly only to me, though the whole hall heard it. "I'm nobody, Riven. I read cards at crossroad inns for coppers. I've been run out of 3 towns this winter for a cheat, and I wasn't cheating in 2 of them." She swallowed. "I was walking to the coast to find work before the snow closed the roads. I got caught in the storm. I saw your postern light and I begged the gate for a night out of the cold, and your steward looked at me coming out of the white and heard the word shelter and said the bride. And I was so cold and so tired and so used up that when a warm hall opened its door and called me a lady, I let it. I told myself I'd slip out at first light before anyone knew." Her voice was steady and her eyes were not. "And then you asked me to read your cards, and I saw the loneliest man I ever met in my life, and I couldn't make my feet leave. That's the whole of it. There's no more under the floor. I'm the wrong woman. I've been the wrong woman since the first hour, and I let you believe I was the right one because I wanted, for 4 days, to be somebody who got to stand by that fire." Behind me, the hall erupted. I heard Lady Ioni's cold fury and Farrell's stammered horror and my captain's voices rising. A fraud, a wanderer, a card cheat who had sat at the king's board and worn a noble name and slept in the queen's own tower, who had made a mockery of the accord, who should be thrown out into the snow this hour, this minute, before she stole the plate. I heard the word liar and the word thief and the word hang. And I heard under all of it my own blood roaring one thing: she is your mate, and the bond does not care who her father was. I lifted my hand. The hall fell silent, because when the King of Carrollfell lifts his hand, the hall always does. "Everyone," I said, "will be quiet." I walked to her. She did not back away, though I saw what it cost her not to. She had her hand pressed flat to the satchel again, the deck inside it, the one true thing she owned, and she looked at me and waited to be cast out, the way she had plainly been cast out of 100 halls before this one, and had learned to take it standing. "When you read my card," I said, "on the first morning, the king on the wall, did you cheat me?" Her mouth trembled. "No." "Could you have arranged it, the card you turned? Could a card sharp have said it? I let you pick your own, you touched it first. I only told you not to overrule your gut." A breath. "No, I didn't set it, I couldn't have, it came up on its own." "And Ash," I said, "my wolf, who has bitten every hand but mine for 9 years and slept in your lap on your second day, did you arrange that?" She let out something that was half a laugh and half a sob. "How would I arrange a wolf?" "You could not," I said. "No one could." I turned to the hall, to my captains, to my steward, to the true bride jeweled and rigid in the doorway, to every noble who wanted this wanderer thrown into the dark. "You call her a liar and a thief. Hear your king. She lied about a name. She stole 4 nights of warmth. For that a hard man would put her out in the snow, and I have been a hard man all my life, and I built this whole cold hall to prove it." I looked back at Sorrel. "But I am done being that man. I am going to tell you the thing I have never said to any of you, and it is not a small thing, so listen." I took her hand. Her fingers were cold and they shook. "I cannot read her," I said. "You all know what I am. You have all felt it, the king who knows your fear before you do, who looks through every face in his kingdom to the floor. I have never once in my life met a soul I could not read to the bottom. Not my council, not my captains. Not one great lady sent to be my queen." I tightened my grip on her hand, and we both felt, a warmth begin under our joined palms, a heat where our skin met, spreading. "Not one of you." And then a card teller walked out of a blizzard begging shelter, and I looked at her, and there was a floor I could not reach, and my wolf lifted its head for the first time in 9 years, and I did not care what her name was, because the name was never the thing my blood answered to. The warmth between our hands had become a light. Sorrel gasped and tried to pull back, and I did not let her, gently, and she looked down, and I looked down, and across the whole silent hall my nobles leaned to see. On the back of my hand, and on the back of hers, the same mark was rising through the skin, gray as wolf fur, curved like 2 hands cupped around a single flame. The same mark matched, 1 and 1, blooming warm and bright between us at the moment she had chosen to tell me the truth and be cast out for it. I heard my grandmother's voice from across the years. "It does not ask your leave. It knows before you do. It waits for the one you cannot see coming." "The mate mark of my line," I said, and my voice was not steady now either, and I did not care. "It surfaces once in a king's life or never at all. My father died without it. It has never once in the history of my house been wrong." I lifted our joined hands so the whole hall could see the twin marks burning between us. "You wanted proof she is worthy of Stonewake. There is your proof. The bond of my blood chose her out of a snowstorm, before I knew her name, before she knew mine, when she had every reason to think I would throw her out, and it chose her anyway, because it was never choosing a lady of Verling. It was choosing her." Lady Ione of Verling drew herself up, white with cold and affront. You would break a sworn accord, the passes, the alliance my house has kept faith over, for a wanderer with a marked hand and a deck of tricks. I would keep the accord in every way but the one that would cost me my mate, I said. House Verlaine will have Carrowfell's protection over its passes, its trade freed of toll, my captains at its border, and my hand in friendship for as long as I am king, all of it, and more than the marriage would have given you, and none of it bought with a bride sold to a man she does not love and who does not love her. That is a better bargain than the one my counsel pressed on us both, my lady, and I think, when you are warm, you will agree. I met her eyes, and for the first time in the whole business I could read a face, and hers, under the fury, was mostly relieved. You did not want this marriage any more than I did. Take the better bargain. Go home to the life you would rather have. Something in her rigid shoulders let go. I turned back to my hall to the men who had shouted for the snow. The next voice that calls my mate a thief, I said, quite mildly, will spend the winter learning manners in the low kennels. She stole 4 nights of my hospitality. I intend to give her the rest of them freely if she will have me, so the theft is settled. No one spoke. Ash the gray wolf rose from the corner where he had been lying, crossed the whole length of that silent hall, and lay down across Sorrel's cracked boots, and put his great head on his paws, and looked up at the assembled nobility of Carrowfell, as if daring a single one of them to say another word. None of them did. I looked down at Sorrel. She was staring at the mark on her own hand, at the wolf on her feet, at me, and the shutters were all the way up at last, all the way open, and behind them, where I had never been able to see, was a woman who had spent her whole life being run out of warm rooms into the cold, looking at a warm room that was refusing, for once, to make her leave. I have to tell you something, she said unsteadily, echoing her own words from before the doors burst open, and I've been a coward about it. She turned her marked hand in mine so our palms met, mark to mark, warmth to warmth. I felt it too, on the first morning, when you picked the card. I've read 1,000 hands and never once felt the cards read me back, and then I read yours, and it was like the whole crooked deck of my life turned face up at once and made a picture I could stand to look at. Her eyes shone. I told myself I'd leave before you knew. I've never in my life had somewhere I was allowed to stay. Stay, I said. I'm nobody, Riven. I'll embarrass you. I don't know which fork. I say the wrong thing to lords. I sleep with the shutters open. I built this hall too cold and kept it that way for 30 years, I said. Open every shutter in it. She laughed the real laugh, the one she had spent on scullery girls and never once on me, and it broke in the middle, and she pressed her marked hand harder against mine, and I drew her in, and I did not read her, and I never would, and I understood at last that this was not the failure of my gift but the whole gift itself. That in a life where every soul on earth had opened to me flat and known, the moon had kept one person back, wrapped and secret and unreadable, and sent her to my gate in a storm, so that I might have, just once, someone I would never finish knowing. They still tell it wrong in the villages, the story of the winter the king of Carrowfell married the card teller. In the telling she is a hidden princess in disguise, or a witch who charmed the wolves, or a great lady fallen on hard times, because the tellers cannot bear that she was simply nobody, a wanderer with cracked boots and a mended coat and a soft-cornered deck, run out of 3 towns for a cheat. They cannot bear it because it is the frightening, wonderful truth, that the thing my blood had waited a lifetime for did not come crowned or jeweled or arranged by any counsel. It came out of a blizzard begging shelter, and told me the truth when a lie would have kept her warm, and was cast out of nowhere in the end, but my own arms. Lady Ione of Verlaine rode home when the passes cleared, with a treaty better than a marriage and, I am told, a suitor of her own choosing within the year. The accord holds to this day. My council, who wanted a great alliance, got a greater one, and never once thanked the storm that arranged it. Farrell, who mistook a wanderer for a bride and set this whole thing turning, I did not dismiss. A man does not turn out the servant who, by pure blundering, hands him his own heart. I gave him the West passes to steward. He blushes when I thank him, which I do often on purpose. Sorrow keeps the shutters open, all of them all winter, so that the cold hall I built to hold one man's loneliness is now perpetually, gloriously freezing, and full of people who do not seem to mind, because it is also now warm in the way stone cannot manage on its own. She has stopped answering to my queen a half-beat late. She answers to it at once, and looks a little surprised each time to find that it is still hers. And every year at the deep of winter, on the night the first great storm closes the passes and no one can ride out of Stonewake, she takes out the old worn deck in the great hall before the whole court, and she deals one hand only one, and she reads it for me, the king who can read the floor of every soul in his kingdom and has never, not once in all our years, been able to read hers. I lay my hand on the cards. I do not overrule my gut. I turn the one I touch first. It is always the king on the wall. But the wall is gone now. In the painting she keeps for me, I have looked, and I cannot say when it changed, only that it has, and the king is not standing out in the cold with his back to the warm windows any longer. He has turned around. He has come inside, and in the lit and open doorway of the keep, waiting, unreadable, is the one card in all the world he was never able to see coming, and never once in all the winters since has wanted to.